we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense so that security and liberty may prosper together.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy, also known as Jack Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, charismatic leader, war hero, playable character in Call of Duty Black Ops.
Do not pray for easy lives, my friends. Pray to be stronger men.
But why is he seen as such a golden character by the American people? And why is he everywhere in pop culture media?
Good luck, Lisa.
Thanks. I'll see you in heaven.
Yes, heaven.
Nothing bad ever happens to the Kennedys! Hey, who's this handsome man about town? I like the cut of your jib, fella. Me too. Me three.
Does he live up to his legacy that betrays him to be so great? Jack was born into a rich Irish Catholic family and grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy, was a rich, womanizing businessman who raised his children to be competitive high achievers, especially grooming his first son, Joe Jr., to be president one day. As for Jack, he was known to be a prankster in school, but also a very sickly child, suffering from scarlet fever and digestive disorders, even being hospitalized for 3 years.
Watch me, hold me, sign my cast for me.
But he always kept his upbeat appearance in his pain. Jack wanted to join the Navy in World War II, but was rejected for health reasons. His dad paid off the Navy, and Jack eventually became a PT boat captain. During the dead of night, in the waters of the Solomon Islands, Kennedy's boat was shattered in half by a colliding Japanese destroyer. And just like that, 2 of his men immediately died. The ship was on fire, and the collision was so great that JFK's back slammed into the cockpit, leaving him with lifelong back problems. One of Kennedy's comrades, Patrick McMahon, was so badly burnt that he was unable to swim. Kennedy saved McMahon by clenching onto McMahon's life strap with his teeth, swimming to shore, and pulling McMahon with him. JFK swam and waded water for 5 hours straight until reaching shore.
This is a model of a PT boat on which I served, PT 109, on which I served. Well, our PT boat was sunk by a Japanese destroyer, and we found a native and gave him a coconut, which he took through the lines and wrote a message on it. The boat came and picked us up about 10 days later, and I put the coconut in plastic and have kept it as a memento of more unpleasant days.
His brother Joe Jr. felt inadequate for not being a war hero, so he enlisted as a Navy pilot, but died in a plane explosion on an air mission. Once back home, Jack wanted to become a writer, even managing to publish a Pulitzer Prize-winning book. But after Joe Jr.'s death, his father eventually turned to Jack to carry the presidential aspirations and pressured him into politics. He eventually became a US Senator.
And that nobody cast any aspersions on my loyalty to this country.
Meet Jimmy Hoffa. Sometime in the late 50s, Jack and his other brother, Bobby, went after the infamous Union leader and alleged mobster for corruption. Quite ironic considering how Joe Kennedy had ties to the mafia.
Goddamn Kennedys. We're going to war with these people. I don't care they're Irish. I don't care they're Catholic.
Are you saying you don't remember doing any favors for Johnny Dio? Or you don't remember the conversation?
I cannot remember.
Then where did this $20,000 come from?
Individuals.
Did you say that SOB, I'll break his back?
Who?
You.
Say to who?
to anyone.
Figure of speech, I don't even know who I was talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Mr. Hoffa, all I'm trying to find out, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm trying to find out whose back you were going to break.
Figure of speech. Figure of speech.
He introduced a bill to correct abuses of big business and big labor. Opposing the bill was Jimmy Hoffa, leader of the Teamsters Union.
I would be very happy to have our legal counsel here, our legislative representative here, assisting me in spending as much time as necessary to acquaint the American people with the fact that this is a strike-breaking, union-busting bill. In my opinion,
Mr. Hoffa, this bill is not a strike-breaking, union-busting bill. You're the best argument I know for it. Your testimony here this afternoon, your complete indifference to the fact that numerous people who hold responsible positions in your union come before this committee and take the Fifth Amendment because an honest answer might tend to incriminate them. Your complete indifference to it, I think, makes this bill essential.
There is no organized crime. The Teamsters not going to tell you something else.
In jail, Mr. Hoffa.
For what?
Among
us. Among you and among your threats and among your brother. What did you say? You heard me.
I will not stop until those corrupted individuals have been put where they belong.
Kennedy eventually becomes presidential nominee for the Democrats.
Let me say first that I accept the nomination of the Democratic Party.
LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, becomes his running mate. The 1960 election, Kennedy versus Nixon. US Senator versus Vice President of Eisenhower. JFK used his clout and his friendship with Frank Sinatra to help his popularity.
Everyone is voting for Jack, 'cause he's got what all the rest lack.
But one obstacle was Kennedy's Catholic faith in a predominantly Protestant America.
I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens also to be a Catholic.
The first televised presidential debate. Those watching the debate on television thought Kennedy won. Those listening on radio thought either Nixon won or that Kennedy tied with Nixon. This handsome devil had drip, looking tan and dressed in a blue suit to stand out from the background. Nixon looked pale because he was recovering from the flu.
Look at this dude.
And looked a bit shifty because of a knee injury.
I'm not satisfied when the Soviet Union is turning out twice as many scientists and engineers as we are.
Is the United States standing still?
I'm not satisfied until every American enjoys his full constitutional rights.
Is it true that this administration, as Senator Kennedy has charged, has been an administration of retreat, of defeat, of stagnation?
I don't want the talents of any American to go to waste.
We have built more schools in these last 7.5 years than we built in the previous 7.5.
I think we can do better.
Let us take hospitals. We find that more have been built in this administration than in the previous administration.
A Negro baby is born in some of our cities. He has about 1/2 as much chance to get through high school as a white baby. I think we can do better.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
I would like to take this opportunity to express my fondness for Duff beer.
I'd also like to express my fondness for that particular beer.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Kennedy used the fears of the Red Scare to argue that there was a missile gap between the US and USSR in the USSR's advantage. But in actuality, the US possessed significantly more in their arsenal compared to the Soviet Union. At this time, MLK Jr. was arrested for civil rights protesting, so JFK called Martin Luther King's wife to offer his help and bailed him out of prison. This gained him the civil rights support that he needed, and Kennedy narrowly wins the election against Nixon. Vice President Lyndon, JFK, and his wife Jackie enter the White House.
So now my wife and I prepare for a new administration and for a new baby. Thank you.
Valores del corazón y la mente humana. Viva México.
Sí, muchas gracias, amigos.
The new frontier begins.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Charisma oozed out of Kennedy in his press conferences, and his humor seemed to disarm a hungry press.
It's been a long time since a president and his family have been
subjected to such a heavy barrage of teasing and fun-poking and satire.
Now, just a minute. Who do you think you are? Now, let me say this about that. Number one, he's not an expert on politics, but I am. So if you'd like to ask...
Now a smash hit record. Can you tell us whether you read and listen to these things and whether they produce annoyment or enjoyment?
Annoyment. No, they produce... yes, I have read them and listened to them. Actually, I listened to Mr. Meader's record, but I thought it sounded more like Teddy than it did me. But
Mr. President.
Mr. President, the Democratic platform in which you ran for election promises to work for equal rights for women, including equal pay, to wipe out job opportunity discriminations. Now, you have made efforts on behalf of others. What have you done for the women according to the promises of the platform?
well, I'm sure we haven't done enough, and I must say I am a strong believer in equal pay for equal work, and I think that we ought to do better than we're doing, and I'm glad that you reminded me of it.
Re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this. I'm the one who's doing all the work, so we just want you to stay cool for a minute.
There is an impression in Washington that there are no Kennedys left in Ireland, that they're all in Washington. And so I wonder if there are any Kennedys in this audience. Could you hold up your hand so I can see? Oh, I'm glad to see a few cousins who didn't catch the boat. So glad.
President.
Now, I guess this chimpanzee who was flying in space took off at 10:08. He reports that everything is perfect and working well.
If I may, Helen, I'd like to respond to that question with yet another flip remark. Wow. Look at me, Mom. I am President Kennedy.
I must have drank me about 15 Dr. Peppers.
Congratulations. How does it feel to be an All-American?
It's an honor, sir.
Congratulations. How does it feel to be an All-American?
Very good, sir.
Congratulations. How do you feel?
I gotta pay.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
Whilst in office, Kennedy set up the Peace Corps program in 1961 so US citizens could become international volunteers to assist those in third world countries. This was partially influenced by the USSR doing something similar to attract countries to communism. The Bay of Pigs, April 1961, one of Kennedy's greatest blunders. Fidel Castro, charismatic and revolutionary dictator of the newly communist Cuba, decided to take control of US companies in Cuba that exploited the country's natural resources. Kennedy feared a new communist country with trade links to the USSR on the doorstep of America, so he approved a plan initially formulated by the Eisenhower administration to use exiled Cubans who opposed Castro to invade Cuba and overthrow his regime. Kennedy made a fatal flaw and pulled back US air support to conceal US involvement in the eyes of the USSR.
Right now, the rebels are pinned down here on the beach. Castro himself is there.
Castro? On the beach?
I speak for the Joint Chiefs, and I think CIA agrees as well. It is imperative that the United States provide air support.
Well, I don't want the United States involved in this.
We are involved in this. We train these rebels. You approved the mission.
And you told me the plan would work.
Mr. President, are you aware there will be significant casualties sustained?
After this failure, he publicly took responsibility, but privately blamed the CIA for giving him flawed intelligence. Distraught, and with Jackie Kennedy as his rock, he cried in her arms.
Jack, what is it? Jack, it's me. You can talk to me.
It's a catastrophe. The 1 hour of air support that I ordered got screwed up. The 2 units didn't connect because of a 1 hour time difference. These incompetent son of a bitches, they can't even tell time. don't know why I ever listened to him.
You couldn't have known.
The president should know. How could I be so stupid?
Jack, you're being too hard on yourself.
Well, they said it.
And tried to call his father for moral support. He lovingly said, "Oh hell, if that's the way you feel, give the job to Lyndon." Father of the Year.
Frankly, I'm not used to this kind of manual labor. This was not in the presidential job description.
Perfect, you're all focused on the airfield. Convoy ahead. You ready to make history?
How do I get everyone to like me?
Baby, a lot of people like the original JFK because he was such a caring leader, and he inspired a generation of young people.
I thought he was a macho, womanizing stud who conquered the moon!
6 weeks later, JFK meets the leader of the USSR. Enter Nikita Khrushchev, Russian Civil War veteran, certified egg, argued for de-Stalinization, but then sent in tanks to crush Hungarian citizens that protested the pro-Soviet regime in Hungary. 3,000 Hungarians dead. Yeah, that guy. With Kennedy's failed invasion of Cuba so fresh, Eggman over here stepped with swagger and thought Kennedy was weak, so he decided to bully him. Kennedy felt humiliated.
Hold me!
Нам 7 лет, и мы будем на таком же уровне, как Америка. А в следующий пойдем дальше, вперед. Но мы, когда вас обгоним на разъезде, мы вам приветствие такое любезное скажем.
After closing in on Nazi Germany, the Western powers and Russia divided Berlin amongst themselves. The Soviet-backed East German economy was so trash, and German secret police tyrannized East Berlin citizens so much to the point where countless fled to the freer and more prosperous West Berlin. So Humpty Dumpty over here built a wall to prevent this. Hundreds of people were shot for trying to cross this wall. In comes Kennedy.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
I'll tell you a war story. I was on PT 109 with John F. Kennedy. I was the first to discover his terrible secret. Ich bin ein Berliner. He's a Nazi! Get him!
Operation Northwoods. Sometime in 1962, US Joint Chiefs of Staff proposed a plan to enact terrorist attacks on US civilians so they could blame it on Cuba and start a war with the country. Kennedy firmly rejects this proposal.
Agent Mason.
Great honor, Mr. President.
Sit. We are in grave danger from the communists. Our freedom, our very way of life is at risk.
But somewhere I read.
Kennedy sympathized with the civil rights movement, but took a more cautious and pragmatic approach because he didn't want to upset his southern base because of the election coming up. He's seen as too passive by MLK and too radical by Southerners.
I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
He wasn't as effective at passing his proposed civil rights bill through Congress. However, he did put his money where his mouth was. Similar to what President Eisenhower did. On 2 separate occasions, in 2 separate states, 2 separate governors physically prohibited the first black students from enrolling and entering white university campuses. Because they blocked the campus doors from these students entering, and because these students were in danger from rioting segregationists, Kennedy sent in the National Guard and federal troops to ensure their safe entry into the campus.
This then is the moment when Governor George Wallace of Alabama walked away from the schoolhouse door.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm glad that the registration is over and
everything is over now. I think we can get down to studying. This is our main purpose here, and I'm glad that this has all been over now, and all we have to do now is get down, look at our books, and start studying. That's all.
We'd like to say that we are very happy to note that our registration has taken place without incident, and we hope that we will be able to get on to our main purpose for being here, and that is to get an education.
We can't consider moving Meredith as long as there's a riot outside, because he wouldn't be safe. Yeah. Well, you see, we got to get order up there, and that's what we thought we were going to have.
President, please, why don't you, can't you give an order to try to remove Meredith?
How can I remove him, Governor, when there's a riot in the street? He may step out of that building and something happened to him. I can't remove him under those conditions. Let's get order up there, then we can do something about Meredith.
Surrounded with plenty of officials.
Well, we've got to get somebody up there now to get order and stop the firing and the shooting. Then you and I will talk on the phone about Meredith. But first, we got to get order.
James H. Meredith, backed up by the federal government's determination that the law be observed, wins his fight in Oxford, Mississippi, and becomes the first Negro known to register in the state university. But the climax leaves bitter wounds. The town becomes an armed battlefield, with federal troops moved in to stand by the U.S. Marshals against the crowds that besiege the campus.
It ought to be possible, therefore, for American students of any color to attend any public institution they select without having to be backed up by troops. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed? Wrongs are inflicted on Negro citizens, and there are no remedies at law.
We cannot say to 10% of the population that you can't have that right. Your children can't have the chance to develop whatever talents they have. I think we owe them and we owe ourselves a better country than that.
Berkeley. Oh, doctor, I wonder if you could send up a little extra medication. I gave it to Mrs. Lincoln. Did you send extra? Yeah, she has it on her desk.
Ask not what your student body president can do for you. Ask what you can do to your student body president's body. For supper, I want a party platter.
On women's rights, Kennedy passed the Equal Pay Act in June 1963, which protected against wage discrimination based on sex. Ironically, Kennedy was notorious for cheating on his wife with models, actresses, an alleged communist, and the wife of a mob boss. Most notorious was his affair with Marilyn Monroe.
Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, I like your funny words, Magic Man.
Hi, Carol. I can now retire from politics after having had happy birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way.
President Kennedy had a dream to reach the moon, mostly because he'd achieved every sexual experience on Earth and wanted to see what space sex was like.
We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because I am hard.
During the space race between the US and the USSR to prove superiority, Kennedy is known as the man who got us to the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
But many don't know that both the US and USSR used captured Nazi scientists after World War II to develop rocket technology. Do the ends justify the means?
We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? The great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. We ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
I said are certain to miss the future.
Oh no, I missed that.
Prime Minister Castro, this missile crisis was the last straw. We almost blew ourselves up. Now, we invited you here today...
In good faith.
In good faith. To sort this thing out.
And why is he here? He lost.
As I always say, forgive your enemies, but remember their names.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. October 1962. A gut-wrenching 13 days of suspense. US intel reports the placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba from the Soviet Union. Castro and Khrushchev see this as their best deterrent against US aggression after the Bay of Pigs. US generals insist on invading Cuba and to airstrike their missile sites, possibly setting off all-out nuclear retaliation from the Soviets. But Kennedy takes a more measured approach. He sends in US warships to intercept Soviet ships that were transporting nuclear missiles to Cuba.
40 missiles. Longer range. IRBMs. They can hit every place in the country, except Seattle.
Mr. President, you give me the order right now. My planes will be ready to carry out the airstrikes in 3 days' time. All you gotta do is say go. My boys will get those red bastards.
Well, General, how long until the Army's ready?
We've just begun the mobilization under cover of a prearranged exercise, sir. We're looking at another week and a half.
But you can order the strikes now. Plans call for an 8-day air campaign. It'll light a fire under the Army's ass to get in place.
General May, do you truly believe that's our best course of action?
Mr. President, I believe it is the only course of action. America is in danger. Those missiles are a threat to all bomber bases and the safety of our nuclear deterrent. Now, without our deterrent, there's nothing to keep the enemy from choosing general nuclear war. It's our duty, sir. Our responsibility to the American people to take out those missiles and return stability to the strategic situation. The big red dog is digging in our backyard, and we are justified in shooting him.
Sir, we have a rapidly closing window of opportunity.
Mr. President, the motto I chose for SAC is peace is our profession. Now, God forbid we find ourselves in a nuclear exchange, but if launched, those missiles from Cuba would kill a lot of Americans. The very presence of those missiles gives the Soviets first strike capability. Those missiles make a nuclear exchange more likely. And that is why I'm being such a pain in the ass about destroying them and destroying them immediately. And sir, given your own statements about Cuba, I think a blockade or a bunch of political talk will be considered by a lot of our friends and neutrals as a pretty weak response. I suspect that many of our own citizens might feel the same way. You're in a pretty bad fix, Mr. President.
What did you say?
You're in a pretty bad fix.
So maybe you haven't noticed you're in it with me.
Those goddamn Kennedys are gonna destroy this country if we don't do something about this.
The crisis was resolved when the US agreed to remove their missiles stationed in Turkey and Italy and promised to never invade Cuba. In exchange, the Soviets would withdraw from Cuba forever. Nuclear war is averted. The Moscow-Washington hotline was set up as a symbolic sign of diplomacy, allowing for direct communication between Kennedy and Khrushchev.
But if you wanna find me, please
Just send me location.
That's it, Pally. You just ordered yourself up a knuckle sandwich.
Why you bullying me?
Now, gentlemen, as I like to think, in the long history of the world, that there are only a few generations.
Sounds like someone breaking in!
It's just a storm, Dick. Sit down.
Oh my God!
It appears the Pentagon has been breached.
Zombies. Gentlemen, at times like these, our capacity to retaliate must be, and has to be, massive to deter all forms of aggression. Gentlemen, lock and load.
Viva la revolución!
JFK signed the Test Ban Treaty, ratified in 1963. This prohibited nuclear weapons testing.
And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. And we are all mortal.
Was this a new Kennedy? One that had redeemed himself following the missile crisis?
Every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War, and towards freedom and peace here at home. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again.
We would expect to withdraw 1,000 men from South Vietnam before the end of the year.
There are no pedestrians or spectators beyond the traffic that follows the path of the motorcade. We can't move anywhere, so the only thing we have to do is kill our target.
Got one?
Got one!
Oh my god! Oh my god! No metaphors at all. Oh no. Oh
no. November 22nd, 1963.
He pauses momentarily to shake a few hands.
JFK and Jackie are riding in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas.
What a tremendous welcome he's getting now. And there's Jackie. She's getting just as big a welcome.
Jackie was in such a traumatic shock that she tried to reach for his brain matter to put him back together again.
I have just talked to Father Oscar Hubert of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church. He and another priest tell me that the pair of men have just administered the last rites of the Catholic Church to President Kennedy. President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The president is dead. Women here in shock, some have fainted. Grown men, Secret Service men, standing by the emergency room, tears streaming down their face. There's only one word to describe the picture here, and that's grief, and much of it. It's official. As of just a few moments ago, the President of the United States is dead.
Shock and dismay that the entire nation must feel at the despicable act that took the life of the nation's president.
What's your feeling right now?
I really couldn't say. Really, right now I just don't know what to do.
I felt as though I had lost a member of my family.
It reminded me of something like what happened to Lincoln.
I think that we really lost someone that would have helped the future of this country quite a bit.
Sir, how did the news of President Kennedy's death affect you?
As a man of God, I would say that I felt the impact of the sniper's bullet. I would also say that I felt the pain that the president had in his dying moments. Sir?
This is a dark day in the history of America. This man, I think, wanted to save America. He is not dead. His spirit lives.
We will miss a great friend. I just can't believe it. I feel like someone in my own family has died.
Captain Fritz. There is a prisoner. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun.
A great many people doubted Lee Harvey Oswald was the only one involved with the Kennedy assassination. Conspiracy theories ranged from mafia involvement to Cuban exiles, but one of the most popular theories involves the CIA. The theory goes that a cabal of government officials, CIA operatives, chiefs of staff, and weapons contractors plotted a coup to remove Kennedy from office because they thought that he wasn't tough enough on communism. He rejected Operation Northwoods, he wanted to diminish the CIA, and most importantly, he eventually wanted to pull US troops out from Vietnam. Defense corporations make great money from war by producing and selling weapons to the US government to fight the communists in Vietnam. But if Kennedy pulls out of Vietnam, the defense companies make no profit. There is only one solution. 1 year later, LBJ declares war in Vietnam. Over 50,000 Americans are killed over the course of US involvement. Was Kennedy killed by his own government to serve the military-industrial complex? Or is this theory just a coping mechanism of the general populace to deal with the collective trauma following his death, an act so unimaginable that no one wanted to believe that a nobody, a lone gunman, could take out such a loved American figure? Anyway.
That's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice.
Air action is now in execution against gunboats and certain supporting facilities in North Vietnam.
I think President Kennedy made a most significant contribution in civil rights.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Is that possible? It's good. We don't want another Oswald.
Public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Have a liftoff.
Hello, Neil and Buzz.
I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House.
Have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam.
And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Bush introduced an enthusiastic Dan Quayle at a New Orleans riverboat rally.
We will win because America cannot afford to lose. Great, Danny. Well done.
The question is whether we're going to go forward to tomorrow or we're going to go past to the back.
As he struggled to answer, Quayle made a fateful comparison.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency.
Benson and Kennedy were both elected to Congress in the late 40s, around the time Quayle was born. Benson had a response ready, and he pounced.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That was really uncalled for, Senator.
You're the one that was making the comparison, Senator.
Now, was JFK as great as his legacy churns him out to be? Yes. No. Because he died so young, we tend to immortalize this image of a vibrant and energetic young man whose weaknesses we kind of minimize and whose strengths we kind of exaggerate. I remember my modern history teacher telling this: if Kennedy had survived, his fate probably would have turned out something similar to President FDR, who was wheelchair bound and suffered from polio. Now, JFK the person was deeply flawed, but the myth, the idea of him is very important, because people, especially myself, need someone to believe in. A bunch of comments under one of Kennedy's speeches, right, in one of the YouTube videos, and this guy says, President Kennedy was a great president. And then the guy underneath him says, he's a phony and a charlatan. And then some guy says, no, you are. This person doesn't even know who the guy is. He just assumes everything about it because he's so offended that someone would insult President Kennedy like that. He even has a Kennedy profile. That guy's me. I am nominee. But he also demonstrated that, you know, one can get through the face of adversity whilst at the same time striving for human achievement. Thanks for tuning in.
My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. Be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
Do not pray for easy lives, my friends. Pray to be stronger men.
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.